Some men build their lives on name and heritage. Others build on the unforgiving weight of the sea. In the private executive suite, high above the Lekki deep sea port, 70-year-old Chairman Han Do-jin, the titan of South Korea's maritime freight empire, remained bowed at a 90-degree angle. His immaculate suit barely moved, but his trembling hands betrayed him. Beside him, his daughter Min-seo stared at the polished floor, clutching her luxury handbag like a shield that had long since lost its power. Across the wide mahogany desk sat a man in a crisp charcoal linen suit, Emeka Davis. He slowly turned a heavy signet ring around his finger, his expression unreadable. 4 years ago, they had thrown him into the freezing Busan rain with a torn duffel bag, an annulled marriage certificate, and one final warning: never step foot in their world again. Now, 20 miles off the West African coast, the Han conglomerate's flagship automotive fleet was trapped. Every hour, millions vanished. Engines were burning fuel, contracts were collapsing, investors were panicking, and every official channel in Seoul had hit a dead end. There was only one man with the authority, equipment, and deep water access to free them, the man they had once deemed unworthy of their family. Emeka finally looked up. His voice was calm. "Chairman Han, you may sit." Chairman Han slowly raised his head. For the first time, he understood. The man they had discarded now controlled their fate.
In Busan, Emeka never asked for handouts. A first-class marine engineer from the University of Lagos, he worked 70-hour weeks solving deep berth hydraulic failures that had defeated engineers twice his age. Through freezing winters, he stood beneath towering cranes in high-visibility gear, his hands numb as he repaired valves worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. That was where he met Han Min-seo. She had seen something in him her family refused to see: discipline, intelligence, and a quiet dignity that did not need a surname. Their marriage was simple: a small district registry, no ballroom, no cameras, just two people promising to build a life together. To the Han family, it was a temporary rebellion. Chairman Han Do-jin saw his daughter's marriage not as love, but as an unforgivable stain on the Chaebol bloodline. For 2 years, Emeka endured the silent slights. At family dinners, there was never quite a seat for him. At corporate galas, conversation stopped when he approached. Servants served everyone else before him. Still, he stayed silent. He believed patience could soften pride. He was wrong. When the Han conglomerate became entangled in a high-profile customs audit, Chairman Han needed someone expendable. The confrontation came at the family's Haeundae estate. Chairman Han threw an envelope across the marble floor. "Sign the mutual termination. You were an employee who overstepped your station. Min-seo's future belongs to the board, not an immigrant dockworker." Emeka stared at the envelope. Then he looked at his wife. "Min-seo, is this what you want?" She would not meet his eyes. "Emeka, be realistic. You have no family backing here. You cannot protect me from this scandal. Please, just sign and take the flight." Something inside him went completely still. She did not fight for him. She did not even look him in the eye. Emeka did not scream. He did not demand a single won in settlement money. He picked up his jacket, removed his wedding band, and placed it gently on the coffee table. Then he walked out. Behind him, the door closed. Outside, freezing rain swallowed him whole. And for the first time since coming to Korea, Emeka understood something painfully simple. Respect could not be begged for. Sometimes it had to be built.
A wounded lion does not roar in the street. He retreats to his own territory. When Emeka's flight touched down at Murtala Mohammed International Airport, he carried no resentment in his hands, only a notebook filled with technical blueprints and a burning resolve. While others saw the emerging Lekki Free Zone as just another coastal project, Emeka saw the future axis of global trade. He took his modest savings and secured a small industrial lease near the deep-water harbor. The first year was relentless. He traded the freezing winds of Busan for the relentless heat of the Atlantic coast. He slept on a simple cot inside a metal shipping container converted into a makeshift office. While competitors relied on outdated clearance methods and bloated middlemen networks, Emeka brought the brutal precision of Korean automated maritime engineering to West African waters. He designed a proprietary deep berth routing system that cut turnaround times by half. He trained local dock crews with military discipline, instilling the same meticulous safety standards he had mastered in South Korea. Slowly, the industry began to take notice. European shipping syndicates started bypassing traditional congested berths, opting instead for the private terminal operated by his young company, Oasis Maritime Logistics. Emeka was not just managing cargo, he was building sovereign infrastructure. He reinvested every single dollar. He negotiated direct green corridor clearances with regional maritime authorities, giving his fleet priority access during international logistical crises. By the end of the third year, Oasis Maritime Logistics had commissioned 4 ultra-modern, high-tonnage emergency tug vessels, specifically engineered to navigate treacherous South Atlantic sandbars and shallow shelf choke points. He went from being an invisible laborer in a high-visibility vest to the operator shipping companies called when ordinary logistics stopped working. He did not call Emeka. He did not check Korean news portals. He did not indulge in memories of cold family dinners or condescending glances. He focused entirely on the steel, the ocean, and the numbers. Because true power never announces itself with noise. It waits quietly in the deep water until the tide inevitably turns. And the tide was about to turn violently. Then came the storm. In late 2026, an international maritime dispute collided with newly imposed fuel corridor regulations, creating a logistical nightmare along the West African Atlantic. 5 of Han Maritime's flagship automotive carriers were stranded outside territorial waters. Their holds contained more than $400 million worth of cutting-edge electric vehicles destined for European and African markets. At first, Han believed it was a temporary delay. Then 12 hours became 24. 24 hours became 3 days, and 3 days became a full-blown catastrophe. Every hour the vessels remained anchored, Han Maritime bled millions. Demurrage charges escalated, insurance penalties escalated, crew costs soared. European distributors threatened to cancel entire contracts. African buyers demanded immediate compensation. In Seoul, the stock market reacted without mercy, plunging 30% in less than a week. Inside the corporate boardroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Chairman Han slammed both hands against the polished table. "Get those ships moving!" His chief logistics officer lowered his gaze, his voice strained. "We have already contacted every major international operator in the region. They cannot legally enter the restricted corridor without sovereign naval clearance." "Then demand the clearance," Han roared. "We tried, Chairman. The West African Maritime Authority will not budge." Han pulled every political lever he possessed. Government ministers were called, diplomatic cables were sent, emergency meetings were convened in Seoul. Yet the answer from West Africa never changed. No vessel could move without a certified high-tonnage escort and direct deep-berth corridor clearance. Han Maritime had neither. On the fourth morning, the logistics officer walked into the chairman's private office carrying a slim black dossier. "There may be one option left, Chairman." Han grabbed the file and flipped it open. Inside were satellite maps, naval clearances, and high-resolution photographs of 4 ultra-modern, high-tonnage tugboats operating along the Gulf of Guinea. At the top of the letterhead was a company Han had never heard of, Oasis Maritime Logistics. Han frowned, tapping the paper. "Who owns this fleet?" The officer hesitated, then reached forward and turned the final page. Han stopped breathing. Beneath the gold-embossed seal of the Maritime Registry was a single line: Chief Executive Officer, Emeka Davis. For 10 agonizing seconds, silence choked the room. 4 years vanished in a heartbeat. Han remembered a torn duffel bag on a marble floor, a simple wedding ring discarded on a glass table, a young Nigerian engineer walking out alone into the freezing Busan rain. He remembered telling that man that dockworkers without family bloodlines had no place in the Han Empire. Now, that same discarded man held the only key to saving his entire legacy. Han's fingers began to shake against the desk. "Find someone else," he whispered. "There is no one else, Chairman." Han looked back at the photograph of Emeka's massive vessels cutting through the Atlantic swell. "Then contact him." The officer paused before speaking his next words. "We already contacted him. He agreed to an emergency meeting." A faint flicker of relief crossed the chairman's face. Then the officer added, "In Lagos." The relief vanished instantly, because Han Chairman finally understood the brutal reality of their situation. They were not traveling across the world to rescue a fleet. They were traveling to bow before Emeka Davis.
When Han Do-jin and Min-seo arrived in Lagos, there were no cameras, no entourage, no line of luxury cars waiting to impress them. Only the humid sea breeze rolling in from the Atlantic and the crushing weight of reality. They had traveled thousands of miles across the world to stand before the man they had once discarded into the Busan rain. Now, they were the ones waiting for permission to step inside his world. The heavy double doors of the executive office swung open. Chairman Han stepped inside first, Min-seo following closely behind. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The office was vast, yet understated. No ostentatious gold decor, no grand family portraits.
Through the massive glass windows, the Lekki deep-water harbor stretched out toward the open ocean, alive with the movement of towering cranes, cargo vessels, and a thriving maritime empire. Emeka stood by the glass, holding a cup of black coffee. He did not turn around right away. Then, slowly, he faced them. The man Han remembered was gone. The quiet, uncertain young engineer who once stood on the edges of her family's estate in an ill-fitting suit had vanished. In his place stood a composed executive in a charcoal linen suit, his presence commanding, his eyes completely calm. Chairman Han swallowed hard. Then, to his daughter's utter disbelief, the 70-year-old patriarch lowered his head and bowed deeply from the waist. "Mr. Davis, Emeka." His voice was hoarse with desperation. "The past was an unfortunate misunderstanding, driven by an urgent corporate crisis. Our fleet is dying out there on the water. We need your priority clearance. We need your tugboats." Emeka set his coffee cup down on the mahogany desk. "Chairman Han." He gestured toward the leather chairs across from him. "In this room, there is no Emeka. There is only Oasis Logistics. And out there on the Atlantic, the waves do not care about your family tree." A heavy silence settled over the room. Han stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. "Emeka, please look at us. My father is humiliating himself. We made a terrible mistake. I made a mistake." She took another step toward the desk, her voice breaking. "Can you not just hear us out, as family?" Emeka looked at her. For years he had wondered what he would feel if this day ever arrived. He expected anger, bitter questions, the urge to strike back. Yet looking at her standing there, he felt none of those things. Only the cold, clean detachment of a man who had completely outgrown his past. "Family protects each other when the rain falls, Han." His voice was steady, almost gentle. Then his gaze cut straight through her. "You only remember my name when your ships are sinking." Han dropped her gaze to the floor. And in that moment, Chairman Han finally understood the most terrifying truth of all. The man they had cast aside did not hate them. He simply did not need them anymore.
Emeka did not ruin them out of spite. He handled them with absolute, ruthless professionalism. He opened a slim black folder on the desk and removed a 4-page contract. Without saying a word, he slid it across the mahogany surface. Chairman Han picked it up with both hands. His eyes scanned down the first page, then the second. Slowly, the color drained from the old man's face. "Oasis will deploy our emergency tug fleet within the hour," Emeka stated calmly. "Your cargo will clear customs and deep berth within 24 hours. Han stopped reading. His trembling finger remained pressed against a single paragraph. "This service fee," Han looked up, his voice tight, "and 22% non-voting equity in our Atlantic distribution arm." "Correct," Emeka replied without hesitation. "You are charging us premium emergency response rates. You are experiencing a $400 million emergency
Chairman. Han's jaw clenched. You know the astronomical value of that subsidiary. I designed the logistical routes that make it valuable, Emeka said quietly. You are taking advantage of our desperation. Emeka leaned back in his leather chair, interlocking his fingers. No, Chairman, I am simply pricing the value of being the only operator on this ocean capable of saving you. Silence filled the room once more. Min-seo stared down at the crisp white paper. 22%. Not enough to run the board, but more than enough to permanently cement Emeka inside the very empire that once considered him unworthy of their family name. Emeka glanced down at his watch. You have 10 minutes to sign, Chairman. Han's eyes widened. And if I refuse, then my heavy tug fleet is scheduled for a German Freightliner at noon. Han stared at him stunned. You would honestly let our fleet rot out there. Emeka's gaze did not waver for a second. I would let you make your own business decision. He pushed a sleek silver pen across the table. The ocean does not wait for pride, Chairman. Outside the glass walls, the Lekki harbor hummed with raw energy. Towering gantry cranes lifted heavy containers. Modern freighters cut through the Atlantic swell. The world was moving forward without hesitation. Only Chairman Han remained frozen in time. Finally, the old man reached out with a shaking hand and picked up the pen. The signature took less than 10 seconds, yet the consequences would echo for generations. The very empire Han had tried to protect by discarding Emeka into the rain had now surrendered a piece of itself to the man he once called an expendable dockworker. And Emeka had not begged for a single cent. Chairman Han had signed it over with his own hand.
As Chairman Han slowly shuffled toward the executive elevator, Min-seo hesitated by the doorway. Her voice was barely above a whisper. If I had stood with you that night, could things have been different between us? Emeka said nothing for a moment. Then he pulled out of his desk drawer a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was the gold wedding band he had left on her family's coffee table 4 years ago. He placed it gently on the edge of the mahogany table. If you had stood with me, Min-seo, I might have spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I wasn't worthy. Min-seo's eyes filled with tears. Emeka turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out across the shimmering waters of the Atlantic. You did not destroy me that night in Busan. He paused. You simply forced me to come home and build. Min-seo stared at the ring. Then she looked at the man standing tall against the horizon. For a fleeting moment, she seemed ready to say something more. An apology, a plea, perhaps even the words she had been too afraid to speak 4 years ago. But she understood now that some doors did not reopen simply because you finally regretted closing them. Without another word, she turned and walked away. The heavy office door closed behind her. Emeka remained by the window.
Moments later, a deep, thunderous horn reverberated across the harbor. The first Han vessel had been safely guided into the terminal. Beyond the glass, cranes swung into motion as workers rushed to secure the enormous carrier. The fleet was moving again. The crisis was over. And somewhere between the steel, the ocean, and the fading sound of that horn, the final piece of Emeka's old life disappeared beneath the tide. The man they had once thrown away was gone. What remained was the man he had built himself into. The tide had finally turned, and this time it was entirely on his terms.